Americans assume that only select nations can legally build and stockpile nuclear weapons. Corporate media and the U.S. government constantly warn of grave danger if nations like Iran illegally develop nuclear weapons. They cite the 1970 Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, commonly known as the NPT. This is an international treaty to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons, to promote cooperation in the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, and to achieve worldwide nuclear disarmament. This treaty means that Iran and the United States should not have nuclear weapons. Nearly every nation in the world signed the NPT because it promised to eliminate nuclear weapons worldwide. The core purpose of the NPT is to eliminate nuclear arms, not to perpetuate the nuclear monopoly of a few countries. Few Americans are aware that the United States and Russia are the most blatant violators of the NPT. Both nations slashed their stockpiles after the NPT came into effect, but retain thousands of nuclear weapons and are building more. The United States plans to spend $1 trillion for new nuclear weapons over the next 2 decades, even though it agreed to nuclear disarmament in 1970. New nuclear-armed cruise missiles are in development to add a fourth leg to the famous triad of nuclear weapons that can be launched from ships, aircraft, submarines, mobile launchers, and missile silos. The cost of these weapons is not paid for by the U.S. Department of Defense, but hidden in the budget of the U.S. Department of Energy. The United States and Russia maintain an estimated stockpile of 6,000 nuclear warheads each, in flagrant violation of the NPT. North Korea has a few small nuclear weapons that it assembled after it dropped out of the NPT a few years ago. The United States has encouraged the United Nations Security Council to impose sanctions on North Korea, but did nothing when Israel, Pakistan, and India fielded nuclear weapons. Israel secretly developed nuclear weapons in the 1960s and is thought to have a few hundred warheads. The United States opposed this effort, thinking that it would encourage Arab states and Iran to build their own. Israel never signed the NPT and refuses to acknowledge its nuclear weaponry despite clear evidence. Iran's interest in nuclear technology dates to the 1950s, when it received technical assistance under the U.S. Atoms for Peace program. In 1967, the United States supplied the Tehran Nuclear Research Center with a small nuclear reactor fueled by highly enriched uranium. Iran concluded several nuclear technology-related contracts with foreign suppliers and invested in education and training for its personnel and began construction of a nuclear power plant. After the 1978 Iranian Revolution overthrew its American-anointed puppet dictator, the United States withdrew support and began a long campaign to demonize Iran and its nuclear program. Iran has been accused of NPT violations for years, but there is no hard proof that Iran has nuclear weapons. In 2012, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appeared before the United Nations General Assembly in New York. His nation has hundreds of nuclear weapons, yet he demanded the UN stop Iran from building any. He said Iran is well into the second stage of enrichment and, quote, "It's only a few months, maybe a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for a bomb." 8 years later, there is no proof that Iran built nuclear weapons. Iran is surrounded by nuclear-armed nations: Pakistan, India, Russia, China, Israel, and American nuclear weapons are in Turkey. If Iran wants nuclear weapons for protection, it can drop out of the NPT and build some. This would not be illegal. Yet Israel and the United States frequently threaten to bomb Iran to destroy its nuclear program. The idea of bombing a nation developing nuclear weapons is not new. China began a nuclear weapons program in the 1950s with significant help from the Soviet Union, which contributed advisors and technical equipment. The United States feared a nuclear-armed China. Amid the utmost secrecy, top aides of President Lyndon Johnson agonized during the early months of 1964 if the United States should bomb China to stop it from becoming a nuclear power. The Joint Chiefs of Staff studied options for military action, including the use of nuclear weapons. The CIA plotted covert action against China's test facilities at Lop Nor. President Johnson decided that the problem was not worth the risks inherent in a military attack. China was sure to respond militarily and would eventually field nuclear weapons anyway. China successfully tested its first nuclear weapon in October 1964. Most Americans do not support the idea of spending $1 trillion for new nuclear weapons, but want to retain some nuclear weapons. 1,000 nuclear weapons is more than enough to destroy most of our planet. Eliminating the 5,000 excess nuclear weapons is a sane objective that would save many billions of dollars, but powerful corporations oppose the idea. Russia wants a new START treaty to slash the number of nuclear warheads, but the United States insists that China must join in a reduction agreement. China has fewer than 300 warheads, while the United States and Russia have around 6,000 each. China has stated that once the United States and Russia downsize to 300 nuclear warheads, it will agree to join them in further reductions. The end of the Cold War left the United States the undisputed leader of a peaceful world. However, control of the American government was seized by elements who transformed this great nation into the bully of the world. Nations that insist on remaining independent from American economic and military control are sanctioned, threatened, and sometimes bombed and invaded. This has made the world a more dangerous place and encouraged the development and deployment of nuclear weapons for defensive purposes. The prospect of nuclear war increased this past decade as the United States government became reckless and belligerent while building military bases everywhere. A 2020 U.S. House Republican study report, co-authored by arrogant Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, called for sanctioning China's leadership, listing Russia as a state sponsor of terror, and authorizing the use of military force against Iran's Revolutionary Guard Special Operations Force. As a result, the question is not if Iran is building nuclear weapons, but why aren't they? They can drop out of the NPT and legally build their own to deter an attack, just like North Korea has done. The prospect of nuclear war fails to restrain American warmongers. The United States openly violated the 1987 INF Treaty with Russia by building a missile launch complex in Romania and another in Poland. Russian objections were ignored for years, so in 2018, Russia began building a new missile launch complex near Poland, yet within its own borders. The world was stunned when the U.S. ambassador to NATO, Kay Bailey Hutchison, publicly warned that if Russia did not halt construction, the United States military would, quote, take out these missiles in a surprise attack.
But I think the question was, what would you do if this continues to a point where we know that they are capable of delivering? And at that point, we would then be looking at a capability to take out a missile that could hit any of our countries in Europe and hit America.